Configuring Layer 3 interfaces and DHCP server. I want to start by opening my lab environment and start configuring my Layer 3 interfaces. This is a simple lab that we built earlier using GNS3, consisting of one Photigate instance that has 4 boards. This Photigate instance is using board 1 to emulate internet traffic using the GNS3 cloud feature. So board 1 is my internet board. I still have 3 different interfaces, board 2, board 3, and board 4. I want to be able to configure these Photigate ports using either my GUI or my CLI. First, let's go the easy way and see how easy it is to configure Layer 3 interfaces using the Photigate GUI. Now I logged into my Photigate instance using the browser, and we want to be going into network. This is our interfaces list, and in here we see our different boards. My board 1, who's connected to my WAN connection, is up and everything else is down. Let's try by configuring board 2, and let's say we want to use this board to connect to our sales team. So I can come here and call this sales, and I can choose a rule, and this way the interfaces can populate our traffic metrics correctly in this top usage LAN DMZ dashboard, or you can just leave this undefined. It does not impact the traffic at all. Now we have different options. We can either input a static IP to the interface directly. We can configure DHCP and have the interface pull the IP address from the gateway. The option for DHCP is more suitable for your internet board, but everything else is probably going to be manual. We want to be seeing how we can configure this. So for the sales network, let's say we want to be using the network 10.10.100.0/24. So we have a small team for sales, and this is not a valid IP address. You have to put the specific IP address for the interface. So say we're going to make the firewall 10.10.100.1/24, and we will not be enabling HTTPS or SSH because we do not need to manage the Photigate using this interface. So basically we can leave all these empty except for ping. And this way my Photigate board 2 is configured to use this 10.10.100.1/24. There are different options, but they are not as important right now. We just want to try this first. And for DHCP server, we can use this interface to distribute IPs to my endpoint devices as well. So if I enable the DHCP server, any traffic for DHCP sent to this interface will return an IP address to the customer. For example, it's already populated that 10.10.100.2 up to .245 is the IP address range using that same subnet that I just created. So it excluded .1, which is the IP address of the interface itself. Nobody else can use it. And then all other endpoint devices, my servers, my PCs, all are going to have IPs in this range, just for the sales department. For the default gateway, it's going to stay the same, and we're going to be using the same DNS server that is configured on our Photigate. We can add different things such as the lease time. We can make it shorter or higher. And in here, this is the mode. For a server, the Photigate himself will be sending IP address or distributing IP address to the endpoints. Whereas if you do a relay, you are basically have a different DHCP server in your environment. Maybe you are using Windows DNS, or maybe you're using Infoblocks. Then you can put the server IP address in here. And then all traffic coming for DHCP, the Photigate will send the traffic as a middleman to this IP address and bring back the response back to the original client. And the way This happens is because DHCP traffic does not traverse routers. So if you have your DNS server outside of your current LAN, then you need to set up something like DHCP relay to work around the broadcast mechanism. So you want to use relay to send the traffic to your original DNS server. In this case, I have no DNS servers except my Photigate, so I want to use it as a server and keep the IP addresses the same from that network. You can also create different things like different DHCP options. You can define the time server, log server, all kind of customization that you can find for the DHCP service as well. But for now, let's keep it on the default settings and just click OK. Right now my port 2 is configured. It has a name and IP address. It has Bing enabled, so you can Bing this IP address and make sure the interface is responding back. But the interface is still down. We need to connect something to it to be able to make it go up. So I want to go back to my GNS3 lab and I want to create a PC in here that can emulate a sales member trying to access something else on the internet. This represents a sales PC. And I want to test my DHCP server using this sales PC. So let's try first by connecting this sales PC directly to port 2. But to make it more realistic, we have to add an Ethernet switch in between, because no endpoints are supposed to be running directly on the Photigate. You should be putting your devices behind a switch or a router in a real life scenario. So I want to create a link from this PC. It only has one port. And it doesn't matter which port I use on the switch because all the ports are the same. And then I want to connect my switch to port 2 on the firewall. So this way, my switch is connected to port 2 on the firewall, the port that I had dedicated for sales team already. So now let's test our DHCP setup. Let's head into our PC and just start this instance. You might need to allow it for the first time. Once this is done, just double click into it and now you have a shell access to this virtual PC component that comes with GNS3. So the way we can test DHCP, we can just put DHCP and click enter. It's gonna send the broadcast message for DHCP and the Photigate is supposed to intercept it and give an IP address as we expect. So now we can see the IP address that the DHCP had got is 10.10.100.2. The first IP address available after the Photigate IP address. And it already knows that my gateway will be 10.10.100.1. So everything is configured properly and everything is working. Let's see if we can ping the firewall interface directly. So I want to put ping 10.10.100.1. And I have connectivity to the Photigate directly through the Ethernet switch. And this is the way you can configure layer 3 interfaces from the GUI with the DHCP server. Now let's see how we can configure the same for port 3, but this time we're going to be using the CLI interface. And I want to create a new Ethernet switch. And this interface will be connected to the Photigate port 3. This time. So we can use port 3 on the Photigate for marketing team. And once I have my switch up and ready, I can try to configure port 3 using the CLI. So right click again on the Fortinet and click console. And once you log in, you are on the CLI. So I want you to put this command, config system interface. And you see the way I do it, I put a few letters and I start clicking the tab. And the tab key on the keyboard helps you finish the word to the nearest possible word for this command. For example, if I go back to system, I can just put sy and I can tab, and then it keeps showing me the different option as I tab more. So you don't have to write the full command or finish most of it like most network devices. Fortinet make it more easy for you to find the commands. Let's say if you completely forgot the command, you can go back to the last portion you remember and you can put a question mark. So once I put config system and I put a question mark, it showed me all the words that can come after the word system. I can put config system admin or config system alias or any of these commands. And then once I know my command, so I'm gonna go back and put AU, and then I can just tab, and then it's show me all the stuff that start with the word AU. As simple as that, we can just put the word IN and tab, and it show me interface is the only possible. So I click enter. Let's see how we can find what information is into this interface command. So I can just put show. Once you put show, it shows you all the information about all interfaces. So I can see port 1. This is set to Dhcp, and it has management access, SSH access allowed. And this is syntax is very simple to understand. You get to see the main important information by default, and it doesn't show you so much more than you need. And it always comes in this nested format where it's more easy to read. But as we see, port 1 is set to Dhcp, but we do not see the IP address on the main screen. We were only able to get it using the command get system interface, but we do not see it in here. So I want to show you really quick how you can do that. So you can put edit to edit any of these interfaces. It's the same command that is written. So I can just put edit, and if I tab, it shows me the different words that I can put after. So these 4 boards plus the SSL board if you are using SSL. So for board 1, we were not able to see the IP address in the main screen. So I want you to come here, and once you are in a specific interface, if you put the same command show, it's only going to show you the interface parameters of that specific interface. Whereas when we done it in the root level of interface, we see in all interfaces together. But this way it's easier if you are troubleshooting a specific interface. You can just edit it first and then click show, and this way you only get to see the relevant information for that specific interface. But now let's get back to the IP address. How can we be able to view the IP address of an interface running Dhcp? The way we do that, we do a different command from show, which is get. And get shows you all the information, including the hidden parameters that you do not see by default. Once I click get and put enter, I now see tons of different options I can put for the interface. And the more I click spaces, the more information I get. More than 4 or 5 pages of parameters I can assign, including DNS, including IPv6, VRRP, everything you can think of is in here. So once you click the get, you see more information than show. And when I put get, I see the IP address in here with the mask. I see which access is allowed to the interface. So I'm using HTTP to manage this, and we also connecting using SSH, and we can ping the interface as well. So now if you want to go back to your interface main screen, you can either click next, and now it's going back to interface, or if you click end, this goes one way up as well. So end or next can get you out of this specific interface. I want to go back to config system interface, and I want to go to board 3. So the way we can configure board 3 using the CLI, we can put edit board 3, and let's see what's in there right now. We can see this port is empty because it has no IP address. It doesn't say DHCP or it doesn't say anything. We can verify by putting get, which shows us all the information inside. And with the get, the IP address is still empty. and the mode is static. So if the mode is static and the IP address is empty, that means there is no configuration at this point. So let's see how we can configure this. First, we can put the command set, and set allows you to give parameters to this interface. So if I go to set, we can use the same mechanism by putting the question mark, and it shows me what kind of information I can set in this specific interface. So it's better to make it more wider and then put it like this, and this way you get all options and you can get the description next to each one. So I can put stuff like allow access to set which permission are allowed on the specific interface. I can give static IP assignment directly using the command IP. I can use broadcast forward. I can use all kind of information. And I will be using this switch too to connect to my marketing team. So I want to do the same thing and create another virtual PC. This will represent my marketing PC. And this will connect to the other Ethernet switch on any board. And the Ethernet switch is configured to connect to the port 3 on the firewall. So the switch is configured to connect to port 3 on the firewall, and the VPC or the virtual PC is connected on another port on the switch. So let's start the PC and start configuring this port 3 on the Photigate using the CLI. I'm back here and I'm in the interface main mode, and I want to click edit and then use the tab button to change between interfaces. Now I'm back to port 3. So we don't have any IP addresses and we don't have any DHCP enabled. So we need to configure static IP on this interface. And the way we can do it, let's say we want to make the marketing team use IP address 10.10.200. So it will be different from the subnet that is being used for the sales PC or the sales team. And the way the syntax works, you put set and then you put the IP address of the interface. So you do not put just the network itself, you put the IP address. So that one is configured in here for this interface. Then you have two options. You can put a slash and put the CIDR mask for this subnet, or you can remove the slash and just put the subnet mask on a decimal format. So I'm creating a bigger subnet for my marketing team because they have more PCs and more devices to use, and I click enter. And now if I do show again, I have an IP address configured on this interface. Now that we configured our IP address on the interface, maybe we need to allow the clients to ping this interface to make sure their gateway or their main router is working and responding. So right now, if we try to ping this interface, nothing will respond because there is no allow access policy on this interface. So we need to also click set allow access. And if I click question mark, I see all kind of different services that you can run on an interface. Mainly we need ping to ping this interface and make sure it's active and responding and sending and routing traffic. If we need to manage the Photigate using these interfaces, we can enable HTTPS or SSH or anything like that as well. But we already managing the firewall using port 1, so we don't need to add any other management access on this interface. So we just need set allow ping, and we can also allow a different service if you want multiple service by just spacing it out and click the word that you need to enable. So in this case, I have enabled ping and SSH. And if I put show, it's showing me my allow access and my IP address. But this is not enough. We configured port 2 to use a DHCP server, but in this case, we still have not configured DHCP server for port 3. So if I were to use the PC to emulate my DHCP, the same what I did with the sales team, the firewall is not gonna give any IP to this interface. and because the DHCP is configured only on port 2, and we talked about broadcast does not traverse interfaces, so that means this traffic will come from the switch to the port 3. The firewall will see no DHCP server or no DHCP relay configured for this interface, and it's just gonna ignore it. He will not reroute it to port 2 because broadcast does not traverse routers. So we need to configure port 3 as a DHCP server as well. And this time we wanna try to do it with the CLI. So let's go back to our Photigate instance. And we finished already this configuration for port 3 from this side. So we can click end or next to get out of it. And end put me all the way up to the root level. So now that I'm here, we use config system interface to configure the interface. This time we're gonna put config system DHCP server and put enter, and now it's just showing server, but you know this is DHCP server, and you can confirm by putting the command show, and it showed me that I have one entry already in the DHCP server, and this is the interface port 2 that I already configured for the sales team. I want to do something similar for my marketing team so they can get IP addresses on the network 10.10.200.0/23. So we can use this as a template to build our next DHCP server. So I can just copy this part up until here, and the gateway is the thing that has to change. We need to use the gateway for the port 3 that we just configured. So I want to put my default gateway is 10.10.200.1. And the next thing we have to do is to put the net mask. The net mask for the sales team was just /24, so we can't use the same thing here. We need to use the /23 command that we already defined. So we can put it in a decimal form in here as well. And we have to define which interfaces this DHCP server gonna listen on. So in this case, I'm using port 3 to allow this traffic to go through. So I wanna put set interface port 3, and the last thing I need to do is I need to configure the IP range, and this way I let the firewall know which IP addresses to give out of this /23 subnet. Maybe I don't need to configure the whole subnet to be a DHCP client. Maybe I need to reserve a portion in the beginning for some statically assigned IPs and leave the rest for my DHCP client. So the way we do it, we put config IP range, and then we put an entry number, just edit 1 or edit any number. And then we can put set start IP. Maybe this one we will start by 10.10.200.50. So this way we left 49 IPs, not including the IP for the Photigate interface itself. So we have maybe 48 usable IPs in this space to give to clients statically and leave the rest to the end of the subnet as DHCP clients. So this way it works as excluded IPs by setting a specific start point for your DHCP range. Finally, let's close the range by putting set, and the end IP for me will be the last usable IP in this /23. Which is going to be 10.10.201.254. Finally, we can put next or end. I'm now back to IP range. I can click next again or end, and now I'm back to 1. If you don't know where you are right now, just click show, and this will let you know that you are in entry number 1 in the DHCP server, and it's showing you what kind of configuration we have set right now. So we have our default gateway, we have our /23 mask, we have our interface where the DHCP will listen on, and we have our range. So let's try our test again using the marketing PC. And if I put on here DHCP one more time, it should start communicating with the Photigate on port 3 and give me a different result. But I didn't really close the statement. In here, if you are still editing the entry, this configuration is not saved on the firewall yet. So make sure you put exit in the end or end. And this way, once you get out of it, if you try again, this configuration have been saved and ready to use. And we can see we start getting different result. And now we have the first IP address from our range, which we set in here. And if I try to ping 10.10.200.1, this is my Photigate interface port 3 is going to start pinging because I have allow access enabled and I have this interface IP enabled on the Photigate. So now everything is working as expected. Let's see if we can ping from the marketing PC to the sales PC. So let's try ping 10.10.100.2. This was the IP address of the sales PC. And as we see, we are getting timeout. And the timeout means that Photigate is possibly disabling or denying this traffic because we have no firewall policy for it. I want to take you to our first firewall policy to see how we can enable traffic to go through the Photigate according to our defined firewall policy. So first, let's log in back to our admin console. And I want to go into my policy and object, Ipv4 policy. As we see here, the Photigate uses implicit deny rule by default. That means it has zero trust rule, that everything is denied by default until you tell it otherwise. So the first rule you see is just deny all. That means nothing is going through locked box. One thing you can do is to enable the login on this feature. You have to enable the logging on the implicit deny rule so you can see important information about which traffic is being denied. So click edit and just make sure you mark log violation traffic. This way you get logging and you know if something is legitimately being broken or something is being denied, you can get the logs for this in here. So if you right click on this policy, the implicit deny, and click show matching logs, you'll see nothing yet because we did not have any logging policy allowed before this point. But if I go back to my marketing PC and I reattempt to ping the interface for the sales PC from here, and I'm still getting the timeout, but if I come to my logging and I refresh, I now do see that 10.10.200.50 was trying to communicate with 10.10.100.2 and is getting denied because there is no policy to allow this yet. If you want to get more information, double click into it, you can see that traffic from port 3 going into port 2 has been denied for policy violation. So these are the interface information that we need to create our policy using this information. So I want to go into policy and object, Ipv4 policy, in a new tab, and we want to use the same information from here to build our first firewall policy. We know the traffic was coming from port 3, which is our marketing department, and going into port 2, which is our sales department, and it was ping service. So I want to come here and click create new. This will be my first firewall policy in my Photigate lab instance. And we will allow traffic from port 3 into port 2. And this way you set your interfaces based on which traffic you want to allow. Now for the source IP address, you have different options. You can use something already pre-populated in the firewall, such as these Microsoft or Windows or whatever comes with the Photigate by default, or you can create new object. There is no way for you to just put IP addresses in plain text. You have to create an object for everything. So let's start by creating our first object, which is going to be address, because we want to choose which IP addresses are allowed to go through. We want to filter by IP address, but as we spoke on the main firewall functions, we can use users from Active Directory or from our local user base on the Photigate. We can use any clients that are already pre-configured on the firewall, or we can create a new address object. So port 3 was used for marketing, and we created this marketing subnet to allow this network 10.10.200.0/23, and this is our range for the marketing client in this subnet. So now I have my marketing subnet. I can hover over it and I can double check my IP address on my subnet mask. Once I confirm it's okay, this is now my source IP address. So now I'm saying marketing department IPs, this /23 network can talk to something. Now the destination will define what is it allowed to talk to. So for port 2, the sales department, we are using 10.10.100.0/24. So I want to create an object for this as well. Give it a name. This will be my sales department IP ranges. And for their subnet, I want to add it in here. And this way, I have both my subnets defined in the address. So marketing team is allowed to talk to sales team. You can define which times in a day this allowed to talk to, or you can just leave it always. And for the service, here you define the board. You can have something open more like a liberal board, where you can allow everything to go through between these two subnets. You can allow only ICMP, which allows ping of different kinds. You can have all TCP ports or all UDP ports. There are many subnets or many services that are configured on the Photigate by default, so it allows you to use the most common services. Things that are under port 1024 by default are already in here. Now, if you want to use something custom, you can create a service object as well, where you can say this traffic is allowed to talk on port TCP 40,000 or anything abnormal. You can create a service objects in here to define ports that are not already pre-populated with the firewall. But for this case, we just need ping. You can do something like all ICMP to allow ICMP traffic to go through, including ping. And we don't need any net enabled. This is usually enabled by default, so just mark this off. And last thing we need to do is we need to enable logging. Where you see login option, make sure you click all session all time to make sure you are logging and auditing your traffic. So once I click OK, now I have marketing to sales on all ICMP. There is logging enabled, and this is the structure of the firewall policy. Now let's try again to test to ping from marketing BC to sales BC, which means we're going to be evaluating this firewall policy that we just added. So from here, I have been getting a timeout when I try to communicate with the sales BC. If I go back up once and I try again, now I'm able to ping the BC on the sales network. And this is how you can create a specific firewall policy on your Photigate. Now, let's say you have been tasked to block some specific marketing person from being able to ping other people or from using a specific service. We want to see how we can create deny policies as well. We know that this policy in here denies everything, but if someone from marketing is trying to ping someone else in sales, this traffic gets evaluated and compared against this list of firewall policy in order. I mean, the order is very important when you are deploying Ipv4 policies. If you try to block somebody, you have to make sure that your block rule comes above your allow rule. So in this case, if a marketing person tries to ping someone else in the sales department, this policy will allow them to go through before even hitting this deny rule. So I want to create an example to show you how this can be happen. Let's say this one, we're going to call it deny a specific user. And we want to define the same parameters we did on the allow rule, port 3 going into port 2. And instead of the whole subnet, I want to choose that specific virtual PC that I just created to show you how you can define your rule from here. Let's give it a name, bad PC. Let's say this PC is infected and we want to make sure this comes out of our network and is not allowed to talk to anything else in sales department. So I want to give it the IP 10.10.200.50. This is the VPC IP that I've been using, and I want to save the object, but you have to add the mask to it. So for a single host, you just add /32 and click OK. Now I have my source IP address set to 10.10.200.50. I want to make sure that my sales department is the same in the destination, and for the service I want to choose all ICMP as well. But for this specific bad PC, instead of allowing the traffic, I want to deny it. And you see, as I denied it, all the other options that are related to accept have been hidden, and now I only get to log violation traffic. Without this option, you have no way to audit your deny policies. So make sure you always allow logging on every policy you create. So once we click OK, we have now a policy to deny this bad PC from talking to the sales department on Bing board. Let's try this out and see if we are getting different result. I'm now looking into my marketing PC again. I was just able to ping this IP a few minutes ago on the sales team subnet. If I go up once and I try to ping it again, you can see I still able to ping this PC, even though I put a firewall policy to deny me from pinging anybody on the sales department. And the reason for this, as I mentioned before, is sequencing. When the firewall evaluates the firewall policies to make a decision if this traffic should go through or not, it evaluates them in order, from top all the way down. So first, it's going to match with the first rule. Is the traffic coming from this subnet? Is the traffic going to this subnet? Is the traffic coming from port 3? And is the traffic going to port 2? And is it all ICMP or any service inside this service object? And then it will decide to accept it. So that means the firewall never had a chance to evaluate this bad BC against the deny rule that we created. So the way you fix this, you always put your deny rule above, and you can click and drag like this. And you always make sure that your deny rule is above your accept rule to make sure that the firewall will use the correct order to talk or to apply policies to your traffic. Now let me go back to my virtual marketing PC and try again to ping the sales department. And now finally I'm able to get timeouts and I'm not able to ping anymore because the policy is now in the correct order. And this was our basic policy and sequencing video. Thank you for watching.